I'd like to thank our off-campus guests who just walked in for being here as well. It's really important to us to make sure that what work Oxy students do in Rwanda, is known outside of the Oxy bubble. So we're trying as much as we can to get the word out. If you give me just 1 second to set my stuff up, I'm going to talk about my photography course. I think. So the photos that you all saw outside were not taken by me. They were taken by the men and women who took the photography workshop that I led. And they weren't just my students. They became my friends. And I still keep in touch with many of them and have some dreams about one day meeting again. But of course, it's not easy to go to Africa every day. So I wanted to kind of start at the beginning. But before I do, I just wanted to say that, Julie as a DWA major, Nelson as a film major, and myself as an ECLS major, despite being from different academic departments, had really tried to do as much of our homework as possible before heading out on this trip. Because we were very much aware of the fact that we, as Westerners, in our case light-skinned Westerners, were in an interesting position. And Oxy does a good job of teaching us all about that. Said's Orientalism, classes on whiteness, etc. So we really tried as much as we could to immerse ourselves in the culture in Rwanda. We didn't live in a hotel, we rented a house, had our neighbors, didn't have a car, tried to dress as much as we could like the people there, and to show them how much we were interested in learning their language and about their history and their culture. So ultimately, though, we were outsiders, but I have to say they made us feel so welcome. So here goes. So it took me 4 days to get to Rwanda. It was supposed to take 1 day, but you know how airlines are these days. I got to fly over the Sahara Desert. I spent a night in Kenya, and the next morning I boarded the smallest plane I've ever seen. There were maybe 8 people on the plane, and it was so tiny that the tallest person in the plane had to crouch down as he was finding his seat. But the flight from Nairobi to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, was maybe about an hour, and I was so excited flying over Rwanda, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. The landscape is lush and green, beautiful hillsides, and if you were to go up north, you would see more mountains. And there's Kigali International Airport. It's a very small airport, but fascinating architecture. And when I got there, I was taking pictures frantically, and this British man said, "You better be careful. This is a sensitive area, it's an airport." So I put the camera away. But as you saw in the photos that were projected here earlier, once I left the airport, I was taking pictures like crazy. So I spent the first day exploring our neighborhood. We were living in the Kabeza neighborhood in Kigali. The photo on the bottom left corner is of the house that we rented. So all the Oxy students, except one, who did the Rwanda project, at some point or another, were living in this house. Julia, Nelson, and I were there at the same time later in the summer. And it was a really nice family feel to be together, experiencing it all at the same time. And we each had really cool mosquito nets on our beds that didn't really protect us from the mosquito bites, but they looked really nice. I felt like a princess. But that day was really special. In a way, it was cool that I was arriving on that day, 4 days late. But it was election day in Rwanda. And it was the second election they were having in which Paul Kagame was running. And he's been the president for a while now. And it was kind of not that big of a secret that he was going to get reelected. But it was so amazing to see that even though they knew he would get reelected because he's such a hero there, he was the leader of the Rwandan Patriotic Front that brought an end to the genocide. People were still dancing in the streets, happily casting their votes. Even children were wearing Kagame things on their heads, like in that photo. That was one of our neighbor's kids. Stickers all over the place. And at the end of the night, we had all gone to the local bar, and I remember people were gathered together, singing and dancing, celebrating Kagame's 94% election.
I gotta ask a question if I can.
Sure.
You know, I heard a lot about this election, and actually it was made a big uproar here. I was kind of worried. I thought,
Right.
oh, wow, is this kid going to go through some hassles, or what's going on there? So explain that.
So I'll explain a little bit about that. There was certainly a big difference between what was being reported in international media about the election and what we were experiencing there. And frankly, I'm not entirely sure which was the truth. In international media, there was talk, even while I was in Kenya for that one night, about Kagame having pushed out all the opposition. Later on, there was an article in the LA Times about a grenade attack. But while we were there, I didn't hear about a grenade attack. And there wasn't much conversation about opposition, etc. It was just Kagame, Kagame all the time, and it was really happy. So maybe if we had spent longer time there, we could have gotten a better sense for what really was going on. But for the month that I was there, I wasn't really able to find what those news articles were reporting. What that means about journalism these days, I'll let you judge for yourself. So like I said, Kagame won by 94% vote, and we made sure to get some t-shirts, which they left. So without further ado, these are my students. All the photos taken in the hallway were taken by my students, and I'd like for you to meet them. We have Asua, Bienvenue, whose name translates in French to welcome. And when I first met him, I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Welcome." I said, "Oh, thank you. What's your name?" There's Yvette. Eric, who's actually not Rwandan. He's from the neighboring country of Burundi and was, I guess you could say, like a study abroad student in Rwanda and participated in our class. And he became a pretty consistent presence in our house, liked to hang out with us. This is Isaiah, John Paul, Dieudonné, Didier, Elijah, Diamour, Pascaline, Sergei, who is Professor Hebert's contact that helped us set up the rental for the house, got together all the students, and was a really big resource for us. His brother, Emmanuel was not there that day. His brother Majot, Jean-Claude, and Thierry. So most of my students were actually older than me, but there was never really a problem in terms of the age difference. We all were friends, learning from one another, but they did treat me with respect, and I appreciated that a lot, and so I always treated them with respect. And if you read the little message in the beginning of the exhibition outside, they always thanked me for teaching them, but I always tried to thank them even more for what they taught me. So we taught the class in the front room of the Play for Hope office, which is a nonprofit organization that Sergei works for. And as you can see, pretty much all we had to work with was a room. And there was a television that I wasn't using because I was teaching photography. I know the filmmakers used it. And the students would crowd around on benches and try to get a good view of my laptop. And we got started learning the basics. It was a digital photography class because I felt that film photography already is so rare here. And the prices have gone up so much for developing film that digital photography would be A, more sustainable, B, more applicable to the resources in Rwanda. There would be no need to worry about getting things developed. One could just go to an internet cafe, plug in their memory card, and see their photos right on the screen. As I'm sure you can imagine, there was a bit of a language barrier. The language in Rwanda is Kinyarwanda, but luckily so many people in Rwanda speak English that we didn't really have a problem with that. So about half of my students could speak English, and they would help me translate. So on the first day, I lectured for 3 hours on the history of photography. And I wanted to have visual examples for them to be able to see what I was talking about. So I used photography from, I guess, people that I learned from when I was first starting out as a photographer. And those included Larry Clark, Annie Leibovitz, Diane Arbus, Ansel Adams, and William Eggleston, who's one of my favorites. And I wanted the students to look at these photos and notice the use of color, the use of light, natural light especially, since lighting equipment is not something readily available to anybody